Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is NBL Free Agency Market Watch. It's bloody freezing, Liam, Santamaria, Cam Luke, where we are in Melbourne. But, Liam, I will tell you straight up, I spent 4 days in Perth, not, I want to dispel any rumours, not interviewing for any job at the Perth Wildcats. I was in town, State of Origin, cool couple of days. I did see Lockie Reed reporting on Channel 10, John Rillie, Jacob Chance to be interviewed by the ownership for that now vacant head coaching job. Talk to me. One on those two men, and two, what else are you hearing when it comes to who's going to fill ScoMo's shoes?
Well, this is the biggest thing happening in NBL free agency right now. Who is going to be the head coach for the Perth Wildcats? You're right. We had that report from Lockie Reed about John Rillie and Jacob Chance. These are two guys who interviewed last year, missed out on getting the job to Scott Morrison. So John Rillie, my understanding, was interviewed on Sunday. Jacob Chance was interviewed on Monday. A third guy who was interviewed last year has been interviewed again. That happened earlier today, is my understanding. That's Judd Flavel, former assistant coach of course, the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, the New Zealand Breakers before that. As a guy he's had 16 years in the NBL. Unbelievable experience. But one more name.
Here we go.
A fourth name who has been interviewed, my understanding, his interview took place on Tuesday. Will Weaver, former head coach of the Sydney Kings, was sounded out, of course, no longer coaching with the Houston Rockets, has parted ways with them in recent times, and so is open to it. Of course, this is a team with Bryce Cotton on the roster and a whole bunch of other talent and a couple of little spots on the roster in terms of imports still to fill, and, obviously the best fan base in the country ready to go. And my understanding is Will Weaver is open to it, sat down, spoke with the interview panel, which I understand includes Danny Mills, Craig Hutchinson, and a couple of other executives there from SEN. And we wait to hear word on how that ends up.
Red Army, get involved. Hashtag NBL Overtime. You can throw it in there. We'll change it a little bit, make it easy for you. But where do you sit? And they're names, of course, that are really well known to the league. Will Weaver, clearly the highest of which has coached in the NBL so far, but three men who have been at successful programs. Of course, John Rillie, part of as a player, now over at Santa Barbara. Judd Flavel, as you mentioned, been around for so long and right there and ready to become that head coach. And, of course, Jacob Chance, a big part of the Jack Jumpers last year that went all the way to the grand final. So hashtag NBL Overtime, hashtag NBL Free Agency, hashtag Red Army wants a coach, whatever you want. Love to hear your thoughts. It is an interesting time. It's an interesting time. Shorter off-season, Summer League, which we'll get to shortly, about to fire up as well. So you want to kind of we were under the impression that Summer League is where, the Melbourne Uniteds, the Sydney Kings, the Perth Wildcats are going to really fill out or have an idea how they're going to fill out their roster. And they're going to go in maybe coachless, considering it starts next week. So time is of the essence a little bit compared to the last 2 years where the pandemic made the off-season so unbearingly long.
Yeah, well, for sure. And they look back on that whole experience of bringing their coach in and how long it took to get him in, the fact he got in late, right on the eve of their preseason games. And they think, well, that had a big impact on our season. I also think that the way the roster was constructed, we flagged that right from the very get-go last year. They were lacking a big from the outset, but they're not wasting any time. Bang, 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 bang. The last few days, they've conducted an interview on each of those days. Those four guys, maybe others in the mix as well, but Will Weaver is a big name. 1 year in the league, took the Sydney Kings straight to the grand final series. Of course, years involved in the Boomers program with Andre Lamanis, and a guy who I feel like his fingerprints were on that Sydney Kings championship last year. A lot of what came to the fore with their success last season began with what he put in place a few years ago.
Boomers, they play tomorrow night. We look forward to that. Obviously, a little bit of a different crew as they take on and play a couple of games in Melbourne. But Thon Maker's interesting because he's a guy that I reckon we speak about him every offseason for the last 4 years, Liam. Selfishly for you and I, we'd love to see him in the league. Well, it sounds like he kind of wants to be in the league. What did you make of his comments today?
Well, you used the word interesting. That's the word he used about the conversations he's been having with NBL clubs. And he was really focused on saying, I'm leaving that with the agent. He didn't want to go into any details. But my understanding is I get the sense he's keen. He's
Absolutely.
Keen to play in the NBL. The thing is, he's still got plenty of value in the global marketplace. So can a team come to the level that they would need to in terms of their budget?
Mate,
And
just to make it simple here, mate. He's got leverage because there's teams around the world who want him, and he's very expensive, his asking price, correct?
Yeah, that's right. But you've also got to look at your roster and say, well, is it worth it? Do we have, what pieces do we currently have? So, look, I look at a team like, say, Illawarra. If they lose to Reith, man, they need a guy like Don Maker to come in and play that role. I look at a team like Brisbane right now. And now there's lots of talk, Aaron Baines and the like, but they need a big. And if they can get an elite local big, they should be having that conversation with Don Maker.
You did say if the Hawks lose to Reith. I was under the impression that he probably wasn't going to be back based on how it's played out so far. But what are you hearing about the big man?
No recent updates.
Okay.
So a little bit of a wait and see.
All right, Dejan Vasiljevic, we know how much we love him. NBL overtime. We just happened to bump into him in the last show of the year when he just signed his new deal. He's great. He's a championship player. He's putting up numbers left, right, and center in the NBL 1. But I did note a little bit of European interest and some from big clubs in the last couple of days.
Yeah, the report from Luca Dosandro out of Europe, strong interest from Partizan Belgrade. Now, that's big. Serbian team. He obviously has Serbian heritage. His old man was a Serbian, I think, a handball player, to be honest. Big club. Now, where does that fit with his outs that exist in the new contract that he signed with the Sydney Kings? Well, this is a EuroLeague team. My understanding was his outs applied to EuroLeague teams plus about 3 or 4 other kind of big European clubs. So he could potentially opt out of that Sydney contract. Now, the issue with all of that is Sydney came pretty strong. Sydney came pretty strong with the deal that they signed him on. So it's no lay down misère that Partizan's going to actually better that. So it's an interesting situation. Feels to me like one of those ones to keep in the back of your mind. When the NBL finishes up in March next season, and if Dejan Vasiljevic shoots off to Belgrade to play out the EuroLeague season with Partizan Belgrade, I could see something like that maybe panning out.
Hey, he told us, and the continual conversation is too about him going to Summer League. So let's talk a little Summer League. You're going to be over there. You're going to tear it apart again. We'll start with him. Is he going to be in Vegas?
Well, we've been hearing confirmation about certain guys with certain teams recently, but we haven't heard anything about Dejan Vasiljevic. But I can tell you, he is literally in the air right now on his way to the States. Now, hasn't got it locked away. I don't want to speak out of turn right here, but he's on his way to the States right now. He's headed to one of these NBA organizations. Hopefully, maybe speak more about it a little bit on Friday. But there's still a strong chance we're going to see Dejan Vasiljevic at Summer League next week.
Around Summer League, you're going to be there. Talk to us a little bit. And, of course, anyone who wants to get involved and check it all out at NBL each and every day via all the socials, Liam Santamaria with the latest. What else would you like? I'm laughing because you nearly tripped up and said the team, and I was hoping you did, to be fair. Summer League, what else you got for us bouncing around?
Well, what do we got? We got Jack White. He's going to play with the Denver Nuggets. Cool, because they came strong for him early, locked him into Summer League before the NBL playoffs. So he's going over there. That's a sign that a guy is a chance at maybe a 2-way contract to get something done. So the tricky thing though with Jack White, he's going to play the Boomers games and then he's going to arrive in Denver a couple of days into their pre-Summer League training camp. So he'll be a little bit behind the 8 ball. Look for him to ramp up his minutes from there. You got to Jim McCall's going to play with Washington. Yeah. You got a Calder Gack's going to play with the Chicago Bulls. And then, of course, all those guys who got drafted. We're going to see Basson at the Bucks and Jiang at OKC. And we're going to see Luke Travers, the big one, at the Cleveland Cavaliers. Can't wait. All
right. Hashtag NBL free agency market watch to get involved. So much going on. Any last words, Liam, before we move on?
You need a heater, my man. You invested in a heater?
No, look, I'll tell you what happens. When you go into a different state and the weather is gorgeous, as the Red Army would know, you get back to Melbourne, it just slaps you right in the face. I've been out and about, pounding the pavement, working on a couple of things myself, and I get home and it's freezing cold. But, mate, you're right. I'll buy a heater. You happy? I'd love to be going to Vegas into the desert, but you go by yourself, man. I'll stay here in the cold. Hashtag NBL free agency market. Won't see you Friday.